I came here today basically to learn from this room and to tell you that I respect what you represent and that I think the official development community has a tremendous amount of learning to do from the business models and business-like approach that you often take in setting up your enterprises and in pursuing your work. But I also came to share the rest of my observations since joining USAID, which has been that I think this community of leaders has not just a lot to gain, but also an obligation to really work with, in a much more direct and effective way, the official community of development practitioners. At USAID alone, the level of scale and investment is just staggering. And you don't fully get a visceral feeling of what's possible in terms of improving the human condition until you join and you struggle with the parallel of having these tremendous resources and assets at our disposal compared to what, and I was in this community until very recently, compared to what even I used to have at my disposal while at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. At its high end, it's giving out about $3.5 billion a year. Compared to that, USAID is at around $22 billion a year. Total U.S. foreign assistance is closer to $52 billion a year. If you look at the total international landscape and just count official development assistance, it's $130 or $140 billion a year. And all of that really should be the kind of risk capital that's employed against outcomes, the way we tried to program those resources at Gates and the way I know you try to execute your work here. So a budget like that doesn't just mean more money for organizations and institutions like the ones represented here to do more good. It also allows for a range of innovative approaches to procurement and purchasing, the scale of commodities that USAID buys, almost $1 billion worth of commodities, nearly $700 million a year in health. We can actually, if done smartly, we can make markets for microbicides, for new vaccines, for certain types of family planning products that can protect women. We can drive down costs. We can transfer product specifications to manufacturers to encourage and incentivize innovation. That's just one example of what you can do with real scale. I look and think about Kickstart or some of the other organizations that work in the agriculture space. And you know, we've all seen how quickly innovators can adapt when real incentives exist against certain types of commodities and business models. So the scale is really not just about the money, but it's about how you create incentives in an environment that really helps entire industries respond faster and more effectively on behalf of the world's poorest people. Operating at this kind of scale also allows us to have a unique impact, especially in the area of financing. When I was at Gates, we would put together specific deals to help support, at the time, CGAP and so many other organizations that made finance more available to entrepreneurs all around the world. At USAID, we have the Development Credit Authority, and that program alone has mobilized almost $2.5 billion in financing through the same kind of partial credit guarantees that we employed in that context. We've been able to help nearly 90,000 enterprises in more than 70 countries through this effort, with each of our dollars yielding more than an estimated $20 in private financing. So as you've seen in your efforts, those types of programs, and I know that's the vehicle through which we partner with some of you around this room, and it's a great program that has a lot of potential to expand beyond what is currently pretty impressive scale. But but one of the things that I've tried to do is introduce a new set of mechanisms and a new set of approaches as we reform USAID to essentially be more responsive to and more effective in pursuing our development mission. That's why we're partnering with the Rockefeller Foundation to support the Global Impact Investment Network, and it's why we're supporting the research of the Monitor Group on how to do more effective, customer-focused, bottom-of-the-pyramid types of business strategies. And it's why we've partnered in the health and agriculture space with organizations like Root Capital. I think Root is here today, right? Yeah, good. In order to enable that excellent program to expand access to credit to farmers and others who depend on agriculture for their livelihoods. But we also know that entrepreneurs need more than just capital, and one of the things that I think differentiates many of the funders that you all are able to access is the difference between what you probably call smart money and politely not so smart money, where the smart money actually sticks with you through ups and downs, where you have real partners who can help open doors or knock down roadblocks for you, that can create the kind of business and operating environment that help you succeed. And in that context, I think USAID has tremendous potential, and the entire official sector has a huge amount of potential. We provide a significant amount of technical assistance, regulatory and intellectual property, legislative support for countries around the world. And one of the things I was frankly surprised, but pleasantly surprised to learn, was that we actually had helped start the Doing Business Report project that now the World Bank leads, which I think is an excellent and very transparent mechanism that allows people to compare their performance in terms of creating an enabling environment for business. So these types of efforts should make all of our work easier. But one of the real realities of developing world entrepreneurship is how many great minds get discouraged, essentially by corruption or graft, or perhaps even more than that, just the brutal amount of red tape that it takes to secure a license to operate in a certain country or to procure and import certain types of commodities. And one of the assets that most official agencies have is the deep partnership with the diplomatic side of official agencies and embassies in countries. And one of the things we're trying to do at USAID is better employ our partner diplomats to help knock down those barriers when projects are stalled or when programs aren't working because of ineffective regulatory environments. We have great examples from Accra to Delhi to Bogota of how our ambassadors and our diplomats essentially help work on what they might think of as relatively small policy or regulatory changes that essentially make the difference between success or failure for some of the programs that we're all collectively implementing. So I think there is a tremendous amount of capability in the official sector. And I want to just talk through a few things that I think we're going to try to do different at USAID going forward so that we can better use those capabilities to support this work. First and foremost is in the area of science, technology, and innovation. Some of you know this history, but USAID used to be the world's leader in applying science to development. In fact, it was a USAID administrator who coined the term green revolution, which creates, in my mind, a high bar for this job. And it was USAID that, at the hospitals in Bangladesh and all around South Asia, essentially created the oral rehydration solution that ultimately saved tens of millions of kids. It was a USAID CDC partnership that helped eradicate smallpox. And that was only available because of the technology improvements in vaccines at that time. And it was USAID again working with CDC and others, notably manufacturing firms in India, that led to the widespread proliferation of polio vaccine, which now has us on the verge of eradicating that disease. By the time I took office just 7 or 8 months ago, that science and technological capability had really almost completely eroded. We are currently working very hard to rebuild our capabilities in that space. And in our Q&A, I'm happy to talk that through a little bit more. But I actually think we have a tremendous opportunity in this administration, which is so focused on science, which is committed to expanding scientific funding and impact across the federal science community, and where almost every head of a major scientific agency in this administration has a unique and specific commitment to development. And so we'll be, over the course of the next 6 months, making some announcements in that space, but I'm very, very enthused about what we'll be able to do together. We also are trying to become a more innovation-friendly organization. We've launched a program we call the Development Innovation Venture Fund. We're changing the way we do performance reviews in the organization so that people aren't penalized for risk-taking behavior, so long as there's clarity around knowing what the risks are that you're taking. We're actually changing the way we promote our senior Foreign Service officers to encourage their own coaching and development of younger and newer entrants in the Foreign Service, encouraging them to take risks and invest in institutional partners as opposed to just executing specific projects. And we've launched an Innovation Fellows program to try and bring really smart, creative people from the private sector and from academia into USAID on 2 to 3 year rotations. And we're going to launch that next calendar year with our 25 Innovation Fellows, which will really launch that effort. So I think we'll start to see many of those efforts bearing fruit. It won't happen right away. It will take a little bit of time, but I'm very excited about it. I want to give you, though, one example. Last week, we all had the UN General Assembly meeting in New York, and I don't know how many of you had the pleasure of being there. It was my first time going not just to CGI, but also the official meetings, which have decidedly a different kind of pace and rhythm to them than I would say CGI does. And one of the things we did is we had a science and technology fair where we invited different organizations like PATH, the Program for Appropriate Technology in Health, but also a group that created a thing called the Jaipur Knee, a $20 prosthetic knee. Kids literally from MIT and the development lab to show off some of the things they've invented, like a solar-powered autoclave for sterilizing medical equipment off-grid. And it was just an amazing and inspirational visual display of what creativity and science can bring to development. But really, in addition to the impressive inventions that were on display, the energy in the room was dramatic because you had PhDs like Seth Berkley, who've been doing this for decades and really pioneering the global effort to create an HIV vaccine. And you had college students who have, in a summer, figured out how to invent some things like a dirt-powered battery. I kid you not, a dirt-powered battery that I still can't actually believe exist or work, for that matter. And you got the sense that, if one of the things we can do, in addition to sort of changing the mechanisms of official assistance so that we can partner better and more effectively, is essentially broaden the group of people who call themselves development experts and dedicate their brilliance and time and capability and energy and enthusiasm to solving these problems, that we can be much, much, much more effective going forward. So, I'd like you to step back for a moment and just imagine the way this sector would be different, this social entrepreneurship and ANDE type of creativity. How different would it be if you could get just 10 or 20% of the global official assistance machine to really be responsive, to really behave differently, to have actual mechanisms that help your institutions, but far more important than helping your institutions is you're actually helping those institutions be more effective, be more results-oriented, have the kind of rapid cycle time monitoring evaluation that feeds adaptation and quick learning, and ultimately bringing the one thing that I think this group does incredibly well to a system that I think doesn't do it incredibly well, and that is the rigor of thinking about scale and sustainability from the beginning. We all know, and last week was just a shocking parallel of this, right? You'd go across the street, and in the United Nations, every head of state would put their tent card up and say basically the same three things. One is, we know exactly what to do to be successful. Insert problem here: sanitation, water, health, private sector growth, whatever it is, we know the set of solutions. We either read it in the Lancet or it was published by a peer-reviewed journal set of referees, and so we know it works. We trust the data and we know what to do. The second is we just don't really scale it very well. And so we've got to invest more to scale. And the way you get to scale is you have political leaders say it's important. You have ministers of finance put more money into it. You have countries that are there as partners rededicate themselves to reaching a particular Millennium Development Goal or a particular sector-specific goal. And then you just block and tackle it. You go after it at scale in a sort of central planning model. And I think you represent the alternative. And the alternative, well, if we know what to do and we don't know how to scale it, then maybe we don't actually know what to do. Maybe the definition of knowing what to do is you know how to deliver something in a way that scales and sustains. You know how to get the unit cost of a prosthetic knee down to $20. You know how to get sterilization in health clinics to be done by cheap machines invented by college kids that cost almost nothing, that work off-grid. You know how to have an extended cold chain into communities that need vaccination that currently can't support that access to that type of medical intervention. And what I love about this community is you think that through up front. You can't actually raise your money and you can't expand your programs unless you're constantly answering, what's the unit cost of reaching a coffee farmer in Ethiopia? Or what's the sustainability strategy for an effort to bring credit to farmers in Mali? And those are the types of questions that you need the full official development community asking in a sort of constant and continual way. Because at the end of the day, I, as much as I love this community and as much as I valued and appreciated my chance to be at the Gates Foundation, where I have a huge amount of respect for what that institution is doing, scale will ultimately come from large-scale market forces and large-scale government reform. And you have a lot to offer. So thank you for letting me be here. I look forward to a bit of a conversation and from learning from you. And I also want to introduce Wendy Apt. Where are you, Wendy? Stand up. So Wendy has just joined us in our Economic Growth Bureau, and she's going to lead our efforts in this space and brings a huge amount of experience to it, and we're lucky to have her. Elizabeth, thank you. Yeah. But seriously, we now have in our federal government a team with Elizabeth Littlefield and Wendy Apt and so many others that have come in. You have a group of people that are now purportedly in charge of official development, right? And we're listening and we care about this stuff, and I think we really need your help to change this system to make it work. So please let us know how you intend to do that. Thank you.